Hi there, welcome to the Neckpour. My name's Lewis and welcome to the Whisky channel where I give you my reviews on a particular whisky from the Neckpour all the way down to the dregs. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you to drop down below, hit the subscribe and the bell icon to see more, and drop the video a like or a comment if you feel the need to do so. And today we're starting a Neckpour of a new bottle of the Naked Malt. To some of you slightly older, you might know this is the Naked Grouse. And it originally was part of the famous Grouse line, but they've decided to change the branding away from that, possibly to slightly premiumize the whiskey. And this is, it's a real budget bottle. I was able to pick this up along with these various other bits on the table for the grand price of £18 just before Christmas. And it comes with a little, 150, 200 milliliter stainless steel little travel carrier that claims to be like a flask, so you can keep things hot or cold, or presumably maybe carry whiskey in it, who knows. And a couple of little travel stainless steel cups that are expandable and open out like so. I mean, as someone who loves a bit of marketing rubbish, this was something I was very sucking in for. But 18 quid, I thought with those, it's always good. You could maybe pop them on your waistband or in a bag if you're going out somewhere and want to have a little sip of something on the go. Or for, if you're taking a hip flask on a train journey or something of the like, seems like a pretty good idea. So apologies for any hard cut there, but there was a car alarm going off on the road outside, which didn't sound brilliant. So I thought we'd pause for a brief moment, and now we're back. So yeah, I mean, for £18, I'm not going into this expecting the most interesting whiskey in the world, the most exciting, the best whiskey in the world. But although they've recently been bought by William Grant & Sons, at the time this was owned by the Erdington Group, at the time this was made, who own Highland Park, who own Macallan and Glenrothes as their three distilleries. So, it's coming from a pretty good pedigree, and it seems likely that it's probably most of their own casks going into this, as opposed to buying casks to then bottle. It is 40%, it is lightly coloured, but it has been vatted from a selection of whiskies, and then it's put into first fill Oloroso sherry butts for an additional period of aging. Probably, being non-age stated, it's probably going to be pretty young, but it has had that additional finishing, and that little bit of sherry should probably hide some of its flaws. So let's get into this, have a little sip and a little smell, see what we think. Well, trying to get into that was certainly a humbling experience there, as I didn't do particularly well. But yeah, let's have a listen to what the cork sounds like. Pretty good. And let's get a little bit poured out and see what we think. I don't know if it's me, but that seemed to come out incredibly aggressively and fast there. That's something I have to bear in mind. But it's, it's a pretty nice bottle. I like the kind of pretty understated branding on there. And let's have a little sniff of this. Yeah, smells like young sherried whiskey. There is a certain ever so slight sort of acetone note on that. Not to the point where it's off-putting, but there is, you can certainly tell that's a very young whiskey. And the other thing you're getting is just a lot of classical sherry flavours of, dried fruits, nuts, spice. But yeah, it's a pretty nice nose. Let's give it a little taste. I mean, it's not subtle by any stretch of the imagination, but it's 18 quid. And, you know, it's not the greatest whiskey in the world. I didn't buy it thinking it was going to be the greatest whiskey in the world, but I bought it because it does taste like sherried whiskey, and that's what I thought it was going to taste like. And if you're having a meal with big rich flavors, or have just finished a meal with big rich flavors, and want a whiskey, but if you've just had a curry, for example, you're not going to waste a £300 bottle of whiskey drinking that directly afterwards, because you're just not going to get any of the enjoyment out of it because your taste buds are so compromised. But that you could happily drink afterwards. I mean, it's very light, it's very short, and it's very simple. They are the big cons of this. There's no getting away from that. It's, thin in the mouth, and it doesn't last a huge amount of time. But you probably heard me laugh as I took that first sip of it. It's perfectly drinkable. This is decent whiskey for 18 quid, It beats the pants, in my mind, off any of the other kind of super budget whiskies you can get. A Johnny Walker Red, a Bell's, a J&B Rare, because to me they're all pretty rough. This is, perfectly drinkable. And again, if I wanted to make cocktails and use that much of it in a weekend, I'm not going to feel bad about it at 18 quid, and that's a really good kind of entry level dram. Again, if you're with someone and they say, "Oh, I don't really like whiskey," this is sherried whiskey at the most kind of basic, lowest level of entry. There's nothing too complex about this. There's nothing too scary. It's not too powerful. It's not too bright. If you've got someone coming around for the first time who's never really drunk whiskey on its own before, they'd be much better off trying this to start with than some big cask strength monster that's just going to absolutely blow their head off and they're not going to know what's hit them. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because this isn't great whiskey, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point of this, that this is great whiskey for £18, and this is very drinkable whiskey. Again, if you wanted to mess around with fat washing, butter washing or bacon washing, all that kind of stuff, again, buy a bottle of this to do it with. Or if you want to cook with it, why not to make a whiskey sauce to go with something? I can just see so many uses for this bottle that you're not going to do with your more expensive single malts and even more expensive blended malts. Because, that's perfectly enjoyable. And again, if I was blindfolded and this was compared to a load of other coloured, chill filtered 40% whiskies, there's nothing about it that screams, I'm a young blend. If anything, the blend probably helps with a little bit of that youth. But to be honest, this is probably the most blown away I've been by a whiskey for a very long time. And it's an odd thing to say, being that it's probably the cheapest whiskey that I've bought in 3 years, 4 years, something like that, is the last time I've kind of bought a real budget bottle. But I am really astonished by quite how good that is. Again, if you're going, to an event and you're taking a hip flask with you, it's the perfect kind of drop to fill in there, because it's whiskey that's paint by numbers whiskey. It's the kind of bare bones essence of what whiskey is that's then been finished in a little bit of a sherry cask. And I know they're using that sherry cask as a blanket to hide some of the youth and things like that, but that's great. I'd have no objection to drinking that. I mean, you're not going to sit there and spend half an hour with a single glass. It's just too simple for that. You know, there's not quite enough going on, and you would quite quickly realize you'd sort of seen everything there is to see with that bottle if you were to sit and drink glass upon glass of it. But as a single glass of, or a hip flask to have in the pocket while stood at the rugby, for example, that's a great thing to do. Again, as I said, something to cook with, perfect. Something to play with in cocktails, perfect. Something to play with in terms of fat washing or any of those kind of crazy techniques that people do that you're not going to use a 50, £60 bottle for. I don't think you can do much better than that. And I think if you're going to spend £30, 35, £40 on a bottle, which is realistically where the next category up from this are, then you're out of that category of feeling that comfortable to play with it. And out of the sub £25 bottles, from everything I've tried, this beats the absolute snot off the rest of them. You know, this is by far the best of those things. And, you know, I get free stuff as well with it, you know. I've never drunk from one of these, but that's fun. And you can have that on you. And if you've got a flask of whiskey on you, yourself and someone else can enjoy it out of a cup rather than out of a bottle. And that's fun. And for 18 quid, again, it just goes back to that price for me. That is simply something that, yeah, at that price, you can't complain whatsoever. And, you know, in essence, this is pretty good. I mean, as I drink through it, I don't think this is going to get a whole lot more complex than this. Again, as it's open, I don't think it's going to get more complex. But I think from the fact that I'm pouring myself a little bit more, shows that I am genuinely enjoying this. You know, that is nice and it's fun and it's at a ridiculously good price. And I mean, when this is at full price at 27 quid, it's probably not the greatest deal. You can probably walk into a supermarket and for that price pick up something slightly better. Or certainly if you shopped around online, you could definitely pick up something better. But if you see this reduced to 18 quid, see it's reduced to anything under 20, I think you'd be mad not to pick it up. Just as something to have in your arsenal that you're willing to mess around with. And you're willing to do things with that you wouldn't be willing to a more expensive bottle. But yeah, overall, I think that's ridiculously good value for money. And it's perfectly nice on the nose, perfectly nice on the palate, perfectly nice on the finish. It's not the greatest whiskey in the world, but it smells nice, tastes nice, and there's no off notes on the finish. And for 18 quid, I don't know how many times I've said it now, but I don't know how you do much better than that. It's £18 and it's a good bottle of whiskey. It's nothing incredible. It's not going to blow your socks off. And if you're a big whiskey enthusiast that's got a collection of 100 bottles, it's doing nothing that something you've already got can't do. However, I think what it does do is it gives you a benchmark and a kind of starting point if you're just getting into whiskey, or it gives you a whiskey that you can play around with if you're more into whiskey but don't have yet a big collection. And for that, you know, it's a whiskey, smells good, it tastes good, there's no bad finish, and overall, yeah, I think for 18 quid, it's an absolute steal and a bit of a budget banger. And it's certainly a bottle that once it's gone, I'm going to think about rebuying. Again, I think this will go pretty quickly because I will be playing with it. I'll probably cook with it. I'll probably do a few things that I'm not going to do with other whiskies. And yeah, I think it'll go pretty quickly. And when we're down to the dregs, I'll come back to give my final thoughts. To be honest, I don't think this is going to open up a huge amount. I don't think it's going to change a huge amount. But, you know, I still can't get over the value. Ridiculously good. I'd certainly buy it again. And drinking it has put a smile on my face. So what more can you say other than that? So if you've enjoyed the video, please drop it a like, drop me a comment to let me know if you've tried this or have any thoughts or any other budget bottles that you think I need to be getting involved with. Please do hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you'll be notified whenever I do post. And I'll see you next time for another episode of the Neckpour, the Dregs, or just my general thoughts on whiskey. But other than that, until the next time, Salancha and cheers, and I'll see you soon.